Johnny Hendricks was a scorecard away from beating one of the greatest fighters of all time, which would have changed the course of MMA history. But even though he didn't do that, he was still able to capture the UFC Welterweight Championship by imposing his high-level wrestling and powerful striking. But a lot of this has been overlooked due to the way his career ended. So how good was Johnny Hendricks actually? Hey guys, it's Kiiyon, and today we're going to be talking about Johnny Hendricks. This was one I really wanted to do because his rise was as quick as his fall. I also wanted to use this video to take a deeper look at his fight with George St. Pierre, which was one many thought Johnny won. And of course, shout out to the undisputed members on my Patreon. Join my Patreon and you could get your name here today. Now let's get to the video. The former NCAA Division I All-American began his MMA career in September of 2007. In his debut against Victor Ratcliffe, Johnny was the aggressor with his wrestling through 2.5 rounds before the doctors stopped the fight in the third due to a cut below Victor's eye. Hendricks continued the momentum on the regional circuit before signing with WEC. There he racked up 2 wins before the company dissolved and some of the roster was moved to the UFC. Johnny made his promotional debut in August of 2008. His opponent was Ultimate Fighter winner Amir Sadollah. It was an impressive debut for Hendricks, who finished a mere 29 seconds into the fight after he connected with a big left hand that forced Dan Miragliotta to step in. His next fight against TJ Grant was really competitive, as TJ was the aggressor on the feet while Hendricks used his wrestling to secure takedowns and maintain top control. But Grant would get a point taken away after 2 nut shots, which led to Johnny winning the unanimous decision. His next fight was at UFC 117 against Charlie Brenneman. After being out-wrestled by Charlie in the first round, Hendricks finished the fight in the second with a flurry of punches that forced the ref to step in. Johnny's next fight was against Rick Story, and although he found some success with his wrestling in this fight, Rick was finding it more both on the ground and feet. Story won the unanimous decision, which handed Hendricks his first professional loss. But Johnny bounced back with a TKO victory against TJ Waldberger by connecting with left hands that finished the fight in 95 seconds. He then fought Mike Pearce at UFC 133. Mike denied all of Hendricks' attempts to take down the fight, which resulted in a stand-up match between the two. At the end of round 3, Pearce secured the only takedown of the fight. But in the end, Johnny won the split decision. At UFC 141, Hendricks fought longtime top contender John Fitch. John was a huge favorite going into this fight, as no one besides champion George St. Pierre was able to defeat him inside the octagon. But it only took 12 seconds for Johnny to land a big left hand that knocked Fitch out. It was a huge upset, but it also meant that Hendricks was now a top contender. So they gave him another big fight against Josh Koscheck. It was a close fight, as Koscheck landed the more significant strikes in the first, while Johnny out-wrestled him in the second, and the third was a toss-up as both connected on the feet and Koscheck secured a takedown. But ultimately, Hendricks won the split decision. Johnny initially wanted to wait to fight for the championship, but instead fought Martin Kampmann at UFC 154. Hendricks finished Martin with a big left hand that knocked him out 46 seconds into the fight. It was a huge statement by Johnny, who was seen as the clear #1 contender. But champion George St. Pierre instead fought fan favorite Nick Diaz. But Hendricks was also on that UFC 158 card where he fought Carlos Condit. The fight was really exciting as it contained everything from stand-up, groundwork, aggression, and heart. The two tagged each other on the feet, with Condit finding more success. But Johnny continued to take down Carlos throughout the 3 rounds. The performance earned him the unanimous decision and was next to fight champion George St. Pierre. Hendricks was seen as a threat to GSP's welterweight throne, as he too had a strong ground game. But most importantly, a powerful left hand that many thought would be able to clip George. St. Pierre started off aggressive. He secured a takedown and attempted a guillotine choke. But Hendricks retaliated with big shots and a takedown of his own. George was also staying active in the stand-up by connecting with strikes at a higher volume. But I feel like Johnny's were more significant. The two were also even in the clinch, as they were both able to connect with punches and knees. I watched round 1 so many times, and honestly I'm pretty comfortable with making that round a draw. Another thing to consider is watching this with no volume on, because it really changes the way you see the fight in my opinion. Initially I was pretty confident in giving this round to Johnny due to the significant strikes, but I do think that the volume from St. Pierre countered that. It was even with the takedowns as well as in the clinch. But I think that guillotine attempt early in the round may have been the saving grace for George, so if I had to give the round to someone, it would be GSP. But in round 2, Hendricks connected with the left uppercut that rocked George, who looked to be in a lot of trouble. The action stopped momentarily for Johnny to put back on his mouthguard, which gave St. Pierre time to recover and come back with punches and kicks. But Hendricks continued to tag George throughout this round and was the overall aggressor on the feet. I would give this round to Johnny. In the third, GSP was beginning to get loose and was now becoming the aggressor in the stand-up by connecting with combos more easily, as Hendricks was visibly getting more tired as the fight continued. Johnny did secure a takedown near the end of the round, but St. Pierre got up immediately. That round I would definitely give to George. But round 4, Hendricks secured a takedown with a trip early and began to bust up GSP with heavy ground and pound. And on the feet, he defended the takedown and continued to connect with heavy shots. That round definitely goes to Hendricks. The 5th round was also pretty close, as George landed a combo early before before attempting to take down Johnny, who threatened with a Kimura. But once St. Pierre was out, he connected with a combo that rocked Hendricks before securing the takedown. Johnny popped back up quickly, but the volume of striking from GSP was a great way to close the fight. It ended with Hendricks attempting a takedown while George was attempting a Kimura. Johnny stood up in excitement, thinking that he had done enough to capture the Welterweight Championship. I would give that final round to GSP, meaning he would be my winner with a score of 48-47, and that's how it was scored by two of the judges, which gave George St. Pierre the split decision victory. A decision that is highly controversial to this day and is widely seen as one of the biggest robberies in the sport. Every judge scored round 2 and 4 for Johnny and rounds 3 and 5 for GSP. It was round 1 that split up the judges, as two of them saw George as the winner of that one. But once again, that round was very close and could have easily went to Hendricks or possibly even be a draw. Many people pointed out how busted up George looked in comparison to Hendricks. And although this may be true, I can't use that as a factor to decide who wins a fight, as fighters like George are more susceptible to damage than other fighters. But in the end, I have to score at 1, 3, and 5 for St. Pierre. Let me know how you scored this fight in the comments below. Even though Johnny lost this fight, he was closer than anyone to dethrone George St. Pierre, who after this fight announced that he was going to take a break from the sport, which led him to vacating his welterweight title. So the UFC booked Hendricks to fight for the vacant welterweight title against Robbie Lawler at UFC 171. The two were exchanging early in round 1, with Johnny connecting with combos and finding success with the low kick. He most likely won this round and the second, where he continued to throw with volume by battering Lawler's legs with kicks and a big knee to the body. But the momentum began to change in the third when Robbie connected with a left that hurt Hendricks and the fight looked moments from ending. Johnny survived but slowed down significantly and failed to take the fight down to the ground. That was definitely Robbie's round, who also took the fourth one as well, as the two stood toe-to-toe trading shots. But Lawler was definitely connecting more. Hendricks secured a takedown at the end of the round, but it wasn't enough, and it seemed like it was even at 2-2 going into the fifth and final round. Both men were exhausted at this point, but Johnny had a little more in the tank to pepper Robbie's legs with kicks, rock him with punches, and secure a takedown near the end of the round. This round was definitely Hendricks's, and after 5 rounds, the judges gave the unanimous decision to Johnny Hendricks, who became the new UFC Welterweight Champion. The fight was a classic, and the UFC decided to run it back at UFC 181. The first round was the closest, as Robbie rushed in with strikes immediately, but Johnny maintained octagon control and secured a takedown. Although Lawler looked good early, Hendricks most likely won this round and the second round, where he continued to press forward, connect with combos, secure a takedown, and attempt a guillotine. Johnny continued to tee off in the third and secure a couple of takedowns. In the fourth, Lawler began to gain back some momentum by pressuring forward with punches. And although Hendricks was able to connect with the jab and secure a takedown, he was beginning to slow down and Robbie was becoming the aggressor. In the final round, Johnny continued to go for the takedown, and if he wasn't able to secure it, he was content with just holding Lawler against the cage and running the time, as he believed he was up on the scorecards at this point. But Robbie continued to push, as he was a much fresher fighter. He connected with the most significant strikes in this fight, as he did all he can to try to finish Hendricks in the fifth. I definitely agree with Lawler winning the fifth round, but he also went on to win the split decision, which I personally don't agree with. It came down to the first round, as Robbie was aggressive early, but it evened out as Johnny connected with strikes of his own and was a stronger wrestler. I thought Hendricks won rounds 1, 2, and 3, and even the fourth could have went to him, but once again, a very close fight. Johnny's first fight after losing the belt was against Matt Brown. What was anticipated to be an exciting fight ended up being a lackluster one, where Hendricks dominated Brown by taking him down 9 out of 10 times and maintaining top control through the 3 rounds. He won the unanimous decision. He was set to fight Tyron Woodley at UFC 192, but he pulled out due to a kidney stone attack during weight cutting. Keep in mind, USADA came into the UFC during this time. We'll get more into that later. So after being out for almost a year, Johnny came back and fought Stephen Thompson in February of 2016. Hendricks was the favorite in this fight, but Thompson found his range early and began to pick him apart with kicks and punches. He eventually won the fight by connecting with a spinning back kick that dropped Johnny and went on to finish him with strikes on the floor. His next fight was at UFC 200 against Kelvin Gastelum. It was the first fight he missed weight for, and the fight didn't go as well either, as Gastelum outstruck Hendricks for 3 rounds and denied his takedown attempts to win the unanimous decision. Johnny's next fight was at UFC 207 against Neil Magny. It was another fight Hendricks missed weight for, and although he secured takedowns early and connected with a few big punches, he was visibly slower, and Magny stayed busy by outstriking him and staying busy off his back. It was a competitive fight, but Magny ultimately won the decision. So after losing his past 3 fights and struggling to make 170 pounds, Johnny moved up to 185 for the first time in his career. His first opponent was Hector Lombard, and he looked much better in this fight as he was moving quicker, connecting better with his combos, and denied Lombard's attempts to take the fight down. He won the unanimous decision, and it seemed like the old Johnny Hendricks was back. His next fight was against Tim Boetsch in June of 2017, but Hendricks fell back to his old ways by missing weight again, but this time at middleweight. And his performance was equally as poor against Tim, as he got finished in the second round with a head kick and punches. After this loss, Johnny came back at UFC 217 to fight Paulo Costa. Although he looked sharp early with his combos and movement, Paulo was the much bigger fighter, and he used his range to keep his distance and pick Hendricks apart on the feet. I will give credit to Johnny, who survived for as long as he did because Paulo was going all out. The fight eventually ended in the second when Costa connected with an uppercut that dropped Hendricks. It was also Johnny's last fight on his contract, and in June of 2018, he announced his retirement from MMA to focus on coaching wrestling. So after going 18-8 in a career that saw him win the UFC Welterweight Championship, how good was Johnny Hendricks actually? He was an elite level wrestler with a left hand that could put anyone out if connected. His striking in general became very impressive during his run as he was fast and threw some nice combos. He also wasn't afraid to stand in the pocket and trade shots with his opponents. And considering he did that against Robbie Lawler twice, that is super impressive. Yes, Hendricks won the UFC Welterweight Championship, but I think his biggest accomplishment was his performance in the GSP fight. He didn't win, but an argument can be made that he did. And had he taken home the belt that night, we would have been speaking about Johnny and GSP much differently today. And even though he did reach the top of the division, he never defended the belt and his career afterwards was never the same. So what exactly happened? Many MMA fans speculate that he was on performance enhancing drugs. Pre-USADA, Johnny Hendricks went 12-3. After the introduction of the anti-doping agency in the middle of 2015, Johnny went 1-5. But does this mean he was on PEDs? Possibly. He never failed a drug test, but he did have troubles with making weight. And Johnny himself credits that to USADA for not allowing fighters to use IV hydration during weight cuts. He credits the IV hydration for helping him cut weight more easily and recover better. And once it was gone, he had a more difficult time making it to 170 pounds. But he also had a difficult time making 185 pounds as well. And the reason why USADA banned the use of IVs was because they could be used to change blood test results, mask urine test results, and administer prohibited substances that could be cleared quickly from the system, just in time to beat a drug test. We will never know for sure to what extent Johnny used the IVs for, but we do know that he relied on it heavily as his career took one of the biggest dives after USADA came around. But other factors contribute to his fall, such as his lack of discipline when dieting and his overall lack of motivation after losing the belt. But I won't forget his meteoric rise to the top that saw him capture the UFC Championship. At his peak, he was a nightmare matchup for anyone, a threat anywhere the fight went. And I know it's easy to forget that due to the end stretch of his career, but in my opinion, his run to the championship earns him a spot in the top 10 of greatest welterweights of all time. My name is Kiiyon, and this was my take on how good Johnny Hendricks actually was. Do you agree, disagree, or have something else to add? Please put it in the comments down below, cause I'd love to read it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. But that's all out for now, so I'll see you in my next one.